can't see because I don't have my glasses on. This always happens to me. Recording, recording, recording. Hey, how's it going? Matt Saunders here, and I'm going to teach you some tune analysis here with a great old tune called Drowsy Maggie. So I want to cover breathing, variations, and how to approach it on the tin whistle if you're at a beginner intermediate level. First off, I'm going to play the tune simply so that you can familiarize yourself with it. So that's at a pretty moderate pace. I'd say that's an acceptable speed to play it at. Some sessions you'd be playing it a lot faster than that, and other sessions not so much. So so let's get into it. My first tip is to make sure that you add some variations into your playing. So we're looking here at the first 4 bars of the tune, and
as you can see, I'm looking at it down here. For you, it's up there.
As you can see, there's a lot of E minor. You can see this arpeggio happening with the E's and the B's. There's some D in there, hinting at an E7 chord. Okay, so right away, one way that we can make this tune a little bit more interesting is instead of playing that the turn, which is what we call the kind of the end of a part of a tune, that last bar, instead of playing it how it's written or normally played. Instead of playing it like that both times around, a simple long B roll at the start can vary it up. I'll play the A part once, and then the second time around, I'll throw in the long B roll, and you can hear what that sounds like. So right there, you're already making the tune just a little bit more interesting. Second tip, be mindful of your articulation. You don't want to be over-articulating the tune. What does that sound like? It sounds like this. Articulation can sometimes be staccato, but it's not always. But I find a lot of times beginners will make this mistake. They'll use too much tonguing with their tongue. Something like this, maybe. This is what not to do. Which is fine, but it's a little bit too rigid. You want to have some legato. You want to have some notes kind of slur together, and then you want to choose very mindfully where you're articulating. For me, I'm articulating on those high Ds. I find I like to kind of punch those out, and that could be a product of the whistle that I'm using right now. I do have another whistle coming in, and I'm going to do an unboxing and review of that. I'm really excited about it, the Killarney whistle. Pay close attention to where I'm articulating. You'll notice sometimes I'm giving it's almost like a little cough on some notes, like that. Now, I'm over-exaggerating it there, but just to play a little more subtly would be. So you can put these little coughs in to kind of just accentuate certain notes, and it's another way of articulating. Tip number 3, holding the whistle. Something that I find is really helpful is to keep your pinky down on the bottom part of the whistle. This gives you a little bit more stability while you're playing, especially if you're playing like an open C sharp note or something like that. You have at least 2 points of contact.
How many steps have I done? Let's see, I did variations, did articulation,
add ornamentation. You don't just want to play the tune by itself with no ornamentation. That's not traditional. That's not the style. So really obvious ornamentation would be to put a roll on all of those E crotchets if you're in Ireland or the UK, or quarter notes if you're in the US. I should make a video about that. That's ridiculous that we have two different things. Anyway, I talked about that in my last video. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Played simply, I just put a roll on each of these quarter notes. So there, that's simple. But there's other ways you can do it. You don't have to play it the same way every time, right? This is kind of going back to the whole variation thing. Sometimes it might sound nice to do a grace note up from the D going into the E at the first time around, which is what I think I've been doing. So I've been starting it going like this. So there, a couple of times I've used that sliding up from the D to go into the E. I'm a big fan of slides and slurs and all that. And then even going back to that whole slide thing, on the C sharp and the B part, so instead of just playing that as a C sharp, I actually start on the C natural and I slide my way up into that C sharp. So the cross fingering for C natural is like this, and I'm just going, so it sounds like this. So right there, we're already getting a little bit more interesting. We're going that ba-dee-ya, da-da-ba-dee-dee-da. So that's another way you could approach ornamentation in a very simple way. And then the last tip I have is breathing. So a lot of the times beginners struggle with breathing and they're not sure where to take breaths and things. And I would say if you're starting out and you're not sure, and you just want a basic formula, like just a quick answer, I'd say you can take a breath on the last note of every 2 bars. Pretty much. Now that's pretty general, but if you're just desperate for something now to get you started, that's a good spot to start. If you really want to get advanced though, you will start to think about where you're taking your breaths, and you'll even create, your breaths will be variations of the tune within themselves. You know, where you choose to take those breaths, that's going to affect your phrasing, which can highlight certain parts of the tune. In theory, any note in the tune can be dropped and you take a breath. That's the whole point. You have to drop notes and take breaths. So if you learn this music by reading sheet music, which is acceptable, but you should start to use your ear as much as possible, you don't see any, it's not going to be notated where to take a breath. You're not going to know where to take a breath because it's not written down. So you have to learn to just drop notes. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Everybody does it. Don't mess around with circular breathing or any of that. I think that's a cop-out. Maybe it's because I can't do it. But it hasn't stopped me. After every 2 bars, you know, you can take a breath on the last note of every 2 bars. So in this tune on the A part, it would sound something like this. All right, now that works, but it's very boring. So listen to how I take my breaths. So there you go. There's some different places you can take a breath in the tune. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it. If you got any value out of this, and if you learned anything, consider subscribing and liking. Leave a comment down below. That helps me out a lot, and it helps me help you. So I'm trying to give you as much knowledge as I have about this. So, yeah, thank you so much.